Good afternoon. This is Renee Hesselink, and I'm happy to share my solar journey story with you. Thanks for listening. Just to give you some background details, my home is 1,470 square feet. I am located in Muskegon County, which is Eggleston Township. And if you're not familiar with Muskegon it is right on the shore of Lake Michigan in western Michigan. My house faces east, and that will be important. We'll talk about that later. My system is 5 kilowatts, 18 panels, and the manufacturer of the panels was Solar World. The square footprint of my system is about 360 square feet on the front of my house. Um, some electrical usage prior to me implementing solar. Back in 2012, I was using about 12,149 kilowatt hours, which equated to about $1,686 annually. In 2013, after I made some energy efficiency upgrades, I used about 8663 kilowatt hours, which equated to 1,283. I'll share today's numbers with you later on. I started the process and made the decision in September of 2013. And by the time everything got in place and we had some weather issues over the winter, my system was completely installed by May 19th of 2014. Here is a photo right after it was installed. Um, and that is the hardware that was on the side of my home to support that system. I had a wonderful project team. Serenergy was my installer, and they are located in Novi, Michigan. And I still keep in touch with them. I got to know them very well and completely trusted them because I had no knowledge going into this project. Belasco Electric. So one of Serenergy's missions was to find a local electrical contractor that was willing to learn how to implement solar and how to install solar. So they did an outreach and ended up choosing a Belasco Electric, which is located right here in Muskegon. My home was the first home that they had installed solar on. So I have to give a big shout out to the Green Home Institute as well. They are headquartered in Grand Rapids, a nonprofit organization, but do work all over the Midwest. They are a tremendous resource, and they have membership based. I am now a member, and they were the ones that came out and did an energy audit for me prior to solar and gave me, a report from that energy audit and, showed me where I could potentially make energy efficiency upgrades. So let's get into some of the cost and return on investment because I know everyone's always interested in that. I did a couple of things that I probably would have done whether I installed solar or not. I had a wild cherry tree in the front of my house that was really out of control. So I had that tree removed as much as I hate to do things like that. I did have to upgrade my electrical panel to 200 amp, but I probably would have had to have done that anyway at some point. There was an application fee to Consumers Energy. I financed the initial amount, 14,580, which made my monthly payments $168. I did that through a program through Michigan Saves. And they still have a lot of programs that they offer both to homeowners and commercial businesses. My return on investment was expected to be at about 10 years. The warranty on my panels is 25 years, and they're expected to live longer than that. So at the time that I filed my federal income taxes in 2015 for 2014, I took advantage of the 30% federal tax credit, which is still in effect through the end of this year. So you got to act quick if you haven't done it yet. But anyway, when I filed my taxes, I got a tax credit of $4,800. So the bottom line, after I had filed my income tax and got that tax credit, the bottom line for cost of my panels was $97.70. So there's what my house looks like on the front. You might ask, why did I decide to go down this path? Well, for one thing, I've spent almost 20 years in a sustainability career, so I felt that I needed to walk the talk. Also, being in that field for that many years, I continued and heard so many times that, well, we can't do solar in Michigan because we don't have enough sun, which is not true. Solar works in daylight, doesn't have to have full sun. Obviously, if you do, it's, an advantage and will generate more solar energy. So I was out to prove that solar does work in Michigan. And I have told my story so many times since then. And obviously, lowering my utility costs. So some things to consider. First of all, I believe in energy efficiency first. So therefore, I did some of the recommendations that my energy audit recommended. I went through my house and did upgrades of LED lighting throughout. Anytime I have to replace an appliance, which I have had to replace my refrigerator, my dishwasher, my washing machine, and my dryer, I chose Energy Star certified appliances. I had 3 inches of insulation added to my attic. And then I did have to replace my furnace. I think it was about 8 years ago without looking it up. And I chose to, for with an Energy Star furnace at the time. Direction of my panels. I had to decide, since my house faces east, not the number one direction you want for solar panels. South is the best. East is the second choice. So I knew that going into the project, and I was willing to, live with that. So I don't get the maximum capacity out of my panels, like I would if they were facing south. At the time, battery storage was not real affordable. Technology was still kind of iffy too, so I decided not to go down the battery storage path at that time. I have since then, so I'll talk about that. It's expected that at some point during, the 25 years, I would have to place the inverter, which is the piece of technology that takes the solar energy that your panels generate and turns it into something that you can use in your home or send back to the grid. And it was expected that I would have to replace that at about 10 years. And I had to do it a little bit earlier than that. So it was replaced in June of 2021, and the cost was $1,500. And then I mentioned the financing options through Michigan Saves. I'm sure there are many more choices now today, but Michigan Saves, at that time, there was very few, and they had a great program that was at a lot less interest than a normal conventional loan would cost. So let's talk about battery storage, because I did implement that in 2023. I chose to go with LG Chem 16 kilowatt battery system. My original installer had called and said, hey, do you think you might want to consider battery? And after talking through everything, I thought, well, I wanted to continue my journey, and I wanted to continue being able to learn and then teach others too. So I said, sure, why not? So on the left there, that's my battery. It's not that big. It is outside. And on the right then is all the hardware that goes with it that's on the side of my home. The battery is programmed to pull from the battery anything that I need, any energy needs that I have at home. It will pull from the battery definitely between the peak hours of 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. If I were to lose power, I have certain rooms that are backed up by the battery storage, like my kitchen with my refrigerator, things like that. I think there was 8 different areas that we programmed in when we set everything up. I don't know if I mentioned, but I don't lose power that often. I probably can count on one hand the number of times that I have lost power in our subdivision over the 20 years that I've lived here. So I'm grateful for that, but at some point I think it'll get much worse than that, like it does in other areas of Michigan. So, so I wanted to be prepared, and again, I'm glad I made that decision. It was just, the right timing then, unlike back in 2020 or 2014. Just to picture the front of my home. Aesthetics is important to a lot of people. I think it's beautiful. People have come over, and especially when I first got it on, installed, I would say, "Hey, did you see my solar panels?" And people really don't even notice that they're there. So I think aesthetics is a poor excuse not to do it. So just to share some results with you, um, and things have changed over the 11 years that I've had my solar now. Um, I track my own information in a spreadsheet. I try to use some of the tools that I get from the utility company, and then I'll share one of the new tools that I'm using. But between the years 2015 to 2018, um, I was generating and still am, but I had an interruption in my numbers because of the reporting that I get from consumers, but um, I was generating 63% of my annual needs and or more. And most of the time it was more than that. So when I got the proposal initially for the system, they expected me to be able to cover about 70% of my energy needs from, with the solar system. So they were right on with that one. In March 2019, Consumers Energy, I used to get a nice net metering report that was separate from my utility bill, and that stopped coming in March of 2019. So that kind of interrupted the way that I was tracking. But I thought, well, okay, what is one thing that everyone will understand when I'm sharing my solar story? And that's cost savings. So I have a chart here of, the money that I've spent with consumers over the years. And I already talked about 2012 and 2013 prior to solar. And then 2014 is the year that the installation was made. So I was at $467. And you can see it was, that or less for a number of years after that. Then in 2020, I believe my inverter went out from what my reporting shows of around October of that year. And bad me, I wasn't paying close enough attention. So I did not discover that until March of 2021. So by the time I got it replaced in June of 2021, I had been without an inverter for 6 months. So the year 2020 and 21 probably reflect closer to what I would pay if I did not have solar at all. At least both of those were partial years. And then it went back down to 417, and then 2023 battery installed. I, went way low on that year. And then 2024, 429, and I expect it to be around probably 400 for the rest of this year. Excuse me. So the new tool that I started to play around with, the Green Home Institute sent this to me. So I started plugging my data into Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Well, it actually allowed me to save it to Energy Star Portfolio Manager. But I first entered all my energy data, electric and natural gas, um, not taking into consideration that I had solar. So when I plugged all those numbers in, I got an Energy Star score of 50. Um, so then I had to figure out, okay, well, how do I take my solar that I'm generating and using? How do I take that into consideration? And I learned from exploring and reading the help guide that I had to set up a new meter that, helped me look at the solar generation and use. So when I plugged all those numbers in, I came up with a score of 82, much better. So I'm planning on using this tool ongoing. It seems to be pretty good and pretty easy to interpret. And I'm used to working in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Um, so I may overthink, think that it's so easy, but it really was. It was just a matter of entering your kilowatts per hour that you use and I did CCFs on the natural gas. So I just wanted to show you too a few of the screens that I have on my app on my cell phone. And these are screens from the tool that the battery manufacturer provides me. This is the screen that I use the most. So, I just check it, maybe not every day, but every few days I look at it and just say, okay, I know my battery's working. Because the other day when I looked at it, it was down to 97%. So it's charged back up. What I'm generating for the day, what I'm totally generating, what I'm buying from the grid, when I'm selling back. So this, again, is the screen that I use the most. But there are other screens that you can use, and I'm not going to pretend that I know all of, what's going on here. But, I probably need to learn all of this, but I just wanted to share with you some of the other reports that I can run from that app. Here's another one. And you can see that you can look at it by the day, the month, the year. Yeah, it's just a lot of good information here. So that's my journey. And again, I am happy to share any information if you want to contact me. I totally am happy with the decision that I made back in 2014 and then adding battery in 2023. I wouldn't do it any differently. I've learned so much. And, I just want to keep sharing my information and hopefully get other people to do the same thing. So thank you very much for listening.